7 ways that your childhood trauma affects you as a parent. My name is Wendy Olobi and I'm the founder of the Intentional Parents Academy. When we talk about childhood trauma, a lot of people do not even understand what it does to them, even as parents today. Number 1 is the attachment styles. Childhood trauma influences your attachment style, affects how you bond with your children. For example, if you experience neglect as a child, or even inconsistent caregiving, you will actually struggle with forming secure attachment with your children. Some of us today cannot hug our children, do not really understand why our children need to actually come close to us and touch us, not because you hate them, but because your attachment style is distorted. Number 2, emotional regulation. Trauma can make it challenging to actually regulate your emotions, which leads to difficulty in managing stress, anger, anxiety. If you have a problem, you are always overwhelmed, you're always stressed, you're always anxious, you're always angry, you might actually be dealing with something from your childhood that you have not really worked on. For instance, this will impact your ability to actually provide the emotional environment for your children. So you are constantly going to be yelling, getting angry at the slightest thing, and getting anxious even as a parent. Number 3, parenting patterns. Parents who experience trauma may actually unintentionally repeat the same thing that their parents have done, same harmful practices that they learned from their upbringing. A very typical example is screaming and shouting and yelling at your child. Many times you grew up, you said to yourself, I don't like how my parents yell at me. But here you are today, you are yelling at your children because you don't know any other way. Trauma could be the reason. Another one is triggers and flashbacks. Certain situations or behaviors in your children may trigger memories of your own trauma. Sometimes your child lies. One of the things that happens to you is that it goes 150 degrees, more than where you should get to. You think, oh, my child is lying. Also, the child will now eventually become a thief. Or maybe a parent told you that liars end up being thieves. So the moment that happens, boom, you just think it and that triggers it. Sometimes it's even something that was not done to you. For instance, maybe your children have so much abundance to it and you didn't have. So you say things like, I don't blame you. You have a lot to eat. If you were in my shoes, you wouldn't have actually been behaving this way. That is trauma triggering. And many times you actually don't say it. So learning to recognize and managing these triggers is essential for actually maintaining the right kind of parenting. Number 5, communication challenges. Trauma affects how we communicate. It makes it difficult for us to set boundaries, for us to express our emotions, for us to resolve conflict. And communication is the bedrock of every family. Most of us tend towards the aggressive communicator. So because we didn't really learn how to communicate, we are also in that process today where we're struggling with communication with our children. Number 6, self-care neglect. I see a lot of us say things like, I've been suffering, I've not slept for the past 4 days. And then another person comes and says, your own is 4 days, my own is 10 days. We actually glory in lack of self-care. So we glory in the suffering because that's what we think actually makes you a good parent. Newsflash. That is actually lack of self-care, and that could be a sign of trauma. So parents who have experienced trauma may prioritize their children's need over their own. So you neglect self-care, you exacerbate your own emotional struggles, taking care of yourself becomes a struggle because you do not really understand it. All you want to do is, I just want to take care of my children because something had happened to you in your past where you struggled with being taken care of, and you think that the only way to actually do this is to do everything and give it your all and actually kill yourself while doing it. The last one, seeking help. Do you know that many of the times that the impact of childhood trauma on your parenting is that you actually are afraid of seeking help? The only way to break a cycle of trauma is to seek help. But most times, trauma stops you from seeking help. So if you're listening to me, you grew up in any kind of traumatic system, you need to go through the process of healing. And when I talk about trauma, Most of us were yelled at continuously, and all our self-esteem battered. You might want to actually begin to work on the healing process to regain who you should be, and then become who you should become. In some extreme cases, you might need therapy. And in most of the cases, you need to be in a system that holds you accountable to help you to actually grow. Because you need to attend parenting classes that will provide you valuable resources for healing and developing a happier parenting strategy. And this is why we're opening the slot for healing from childhood trauma on Monday. Do not miss being in that class, because it's going to change your life. I know people who have gone through this class that it has changed not just their life but also their finances, because trauma stops you. And lastly, do not forget that when you are traumatized in your childhood, you don't stop loving the people who traumatized you, your parents. You actually stop loving yourself. So it ends up making you bleeding on those who didn't cut you. Come and go through the healing process so that you don't bleed on people who didn't cut you. See you in that class and have an amazing day.